Right. Good morning. Welcome in, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We're going to let people stroll in. It's a busy month this June. Of course, we're so excited to see you soon in a couple of weeks for our CCEC Forum in LA. We are literally 2 weeks out. So come on in, make yourself at home. As you come in, if you would love to introduce yourself or even put yourself on camera, we always like to know who's here and see you. So I'll just introduce myself. I'm Angie Hacker. I'm the Statewide Best Practices Coordinator for the California Climate and Energy Collaborative here with our 53rd LERN, Local Energy Resources Network. I want to encourage you and the team here to introduce yourselves over chat, say hello. And as folks are rolling in, we're super excited to be together in 2 weeks at the CCEC Forum with 500 of our closest friends, it's looking like, and lots of interesting huddles and extras and field trips and networking events. And I really think that folks are just ready to be together. I know I certainly need the recharge of my fellow energy and climate folks at this point in the year, and you probably do too. Okay, well, let's get into what we're up to today. So as usual, these are interactive 1 hour plus meetings designed to be a regular space where local governments and those who work for them and with them can help each other learn about available opportunities to advance your energy and climate goals. I'm going to do my usual fire hose of opportunities that are timely so that you don't have to do all that work of hunting and pecking and can get back to your jobs. We'll spotlight a couple of things that are pretty prevalent and timely right now. A lot of you are thinking about the fallout from the hearing that happened recently, the CARB hearing, and what it means for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So we have a speaker here for that. We also have a couple of short spotlights on some funding opportunities. CEC wants us to share a cost share opportunity for geothermal, and then SGC has a variety of grants coming out, and they have so many that they're doing a workshop on it, so we'll tell you about that. We have two featured discussions today. So one will be with our friends at the California Energy Commission on the EPIC program and their 2026 to 30 investment plan, basically how they are planning to develop the right grants out of this funding source that they have that can help meet some of the needs that you all have on the ground. And there'll be opportunities for input on that. And we also are joined today by a representative of the City of Cupertino, who's going to talk a little bit about how the City of Cupertino has developed some public dashboards to look at their public sector buildings and have some real successes to share with you about what that data analytics has been able to do for them. So that's the agenda for today. And if we can, we'll go right into our opportunity roundtable. As we do this, I want to invite everybody. This is a crowdsourced opportunity roundtable, meaning if I miss something of timely funding or input opportunity or other form of assistance, I want you to help me and share it. And so we'll walk through, like we always do, sort of this messy cheat sheet, and you're going to get everything at the end. Highlights in yellow mean I'm going to talk about it. It's something we haven't talked about before. Highlights in blue mean we're going to put a pin in it because we're going to talk about it in more detail in this program today. And so on the left there, you see that bit on the CARB hearing on GGRF. It's an enormously consequential decision that was recently made, and we're going to get into detail on it in our first spotlight. But let's move through some funding opportunities. So the first one up here is from Strategic Growth Council and Department of Conservation. It's coming up really quick, so the deadline is June 17th. It's probably one of those that you would have had to have started on already in order to apply, but I want to make sure it's on your radar. Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation, it's round 11B, so cycle 11B. And it is something that does happen regularly, and it's could be related to folks of you that are working on your climate action plans in the agricultural space. So there are $30 million available in this particular round for different funding types. So there's agricultural conservation acquisitions, and that's for things like protecting important agricultural lands under threat of conversion to non-agricultural uses, and then agricultural conservation planning. So that's to develop and implement plans for the protection of agricultural lands under the pressure of being converted to non-agricultural uses. So just to have that one on your radar if agriculture is something that you are working on. Next up, the California Energy Commission has a national EV infrastructure grant. It's 5 South grants, meaning that this is available specifically to a region, including Imperial, Riverside, San Bernardino, and San Diego counties. There's about $30 million available here. The deadline's June 18th. Award amount. So they're looking for projects. They would like to fund projects that are eligible up to 80% of the total allowable project, or $8 million, whichever is less. The fund is to fund projects that will strategically deploy high-powered, direct current, fast-charging infrastructure to support medium and heavy-duty electric vehicle travel along major corridors of the state highway system in southern parts of California. This one's open to all private entities, but this might be something where there's a public-private partnership available option. Okay, I know that a lot of you are thinking about EVs. You might also be thinking about induction cooking. So this next one is from CalMTA. It's not a grant, it's an RFP. And so it's called the Induction Cooking Market Transformation Implementation RFP. This one you have until July 17th. They're seeking qualified contractors to implement a scope of work identified for market deployment of the Induction Cooking Market Transformation Initiative Plan, and it's designed to accelerate the adoption of 120-volt induction cooktops and ranges in California's kitchens to provide high-quality cooking experience with the added health and safety benefits afforded by induction technology. So I think kind of a demonstration. I know a lot of you are working on electrification and this particular issue. So the next one I wanted to share is California Energy Commission. Again, transportation focused. This one is a Clean Transportation Program Hydrogen Infrastructure Project Opportunity Grants. So that is, you have till July 20th on that one. There's $45 million available in total, and award amounts are going to be between $2 and $5 million. This is going to be for a variety of different opportunities. And so it's a program providing funding for the deployment of hydrogen refueling infrastructure for light, medium, and or heavy duty on-road fuel cell electric vehicles. The program supports projects that develop and deploy zero emission technology and fuels in the marketplace, and some other items. So if you're looking into hydrogen, here's an opportunity for you. I also wanted to share this other one I thought was really interesting, although it has interesting eligibility. So California Energy Commission, again, Electric Vehicle Hub, Outreach, Messaging, and Equipment, so EV Home grants. This one you have all the way out until August 18th. There's $100 million available in this one, and award amounts for phase 1 go to $5 million, phase 2 go to $5 million also. The phases have different meanings. Phase 1 is required, so you'd start there. You could be a nonprofit, a community choice aggregator, or a community-based organization to be eligible for this one. Grant funding for projects is intended to accelerate electric vehicle adoption by connecting prospective drivers with incentives for EVs and residential charging equipment, facilitating more charger installations, and providing education and outreach on EV benefits, charging options, and available incentives. And so there you might be, if you get round 1 or phase 1, you might be eligible for phase 2. So there's things like education and outreach, assistance, applying for incentives and rebates, and residential EV charger installation support. So those are among the eligible activities. And I also wanted to share one from CAL FIRE here. So this one, you know, a lot of you in your climate action plans have mitigation of wildfire emissions. So it could be relevant to you, or you send it along to your fire folks. This one's a Regional Wildfire and Landscapes Resilience Grant. There's a pre-proposal for this one due on June 30th coming up, and then the application is due in September 17th. This one is awards will be between $5 and $20 million, and the goal of this program is to accelerate the development and implementation of regional scale landscape health and wildfire prevention initiatives to improve local fire prevention capacity and forest health resilience and reduce the risk of wildfire spreading into populated areas from the wildlands. Okay, so that was a lot of potential funding opportunities. The ones here in blue we're going to spotlight in a moment here. A lot of stuff from SGC as well as one from CEC. The one other thing I wanted to mention here is just a webinar that's coming up with our friends at the CPUC, which is exactly what it sounds like, Pathways to Engaging with the PUC. It's going to be on June 30th, 2026. And it's about like how you can practically actually engage in PUC rulemakings and filings and proceedings. And it's going to feature our friend Casey Daly with WR Cogs. So we're excited about that. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about SLECC later on at the end and what you can expect out of our next June 23rd SLECC. So let's go ahead and move into our spotlights. And as we do, I'll just remind you to put anything else in the chat that I might have forgotten or missed, any other opportunities that can help our friends around the state advance our energy and climate initiatives. So with that, fire hose, we'll take a quick breath and we are going to introduce our first speaker, Steve Hansen. He's the managing partner of Lighthouse Public Affairs. He's actually a former board member of Civic Well, so we know him pretty well. He's around for a lot of our things. So he's here because there was a big decision made on May 29th at a CARB hearing that happened in Sacramento. I was there. A lot of us are still processing the implications of that and the future of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And I thought, let's have Steve, who recently wrote an article on it, talk to us about what happened, what are the implications for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund on place-based emission reduction grants, and what's next. So I'll hand it off to Steve, and as he's talking, if you have a couple of questions, we'll leave a couple minutes for that. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks so much, Angie. Can I share? I've just got a couple of short slides for folks, but I think you have to pull your slides down for me to do that. There you go. All right. This exciting conversation. I know everybody is trying to synthesize all the things going on in the world, from the federal attacks on climate programs to sort of what's going on here in California as we rejigger a lot of things to figure out with the budget what we can do to backfill. And also we've had our own elections on top of this, and the legislature is grappling with simultaneous convergence of a lot of issues. And that's kind of what I wrote the article on. A lot of you are aware that at the end of last legislative session, there was a hasty effort to extend cap and trade, which became cap and invest. And the vehicle for that was AB 1207. And then there was sort of a sidecar bill, SB 840 by current President Pro Tem Monique Limon, that set some expectations around greenhouse gas reduction funds and where they would go. And so it's in that context to the reauthorization and extension of cap and trade, which is now cap and invest in 1207, that CARB began its rulemaking process. And for the last 6 months or so has been kind of working through these different threats, the Trump administration, in their efforts to undo the US EPA's determination around greenhouse gas emissions. They had a special waiver at the US Senate where they repealed that rule. And so I just wanted to set the table a little bit as we go here. CARB has been under tremendous pressure from all sides, from advocates who want to see greater progress, industry, and obviously affordability has become, for the last couple of years, one of the biggest policy conversations, as we've seen several refiners close in California, and sort of like a lot of pressure on our systems, not just from the price of fossil fuels, but also on the electrical side with data centers absorbing more and more. That context led CARB to redoing, as part of its extension of cap and invest, these rules. And part of what CARB did, it was marathon hearing over 2 days, is they changed how cap and invest works to give a little bit more space in the near term to those industries that are under significant pressure, that are emitters, to potentially redo some of their operations to reduce their carbon intensity. And they've also continued to try to figure out ways to create affordability. So CARB used its mechanism to move allowances from under the cap to outside the cap. And what that partially did is it ends up short-circuiting how GGRF works. GGRF is like a sin tax, a tobacco tax or something else, where ultimately over time, as the cap lowers, those revenues may diminish. Fewer credits will be available, so maybe their value goes up. But we're funding a lot of ongoing programs, capital programs with those funds. On one side, you see the potential reduction of, they did mitigate it a little bit of about 1.65 billion in revenue that would go to, as you see here, AHSC, TERSIP, LC Top, and the AB 617 programs. When the legislature redid cap and GGRF funding last year, they anticipated a much larger number for revenue than the programs really ever produced. And so there's off the top money for high-speed rail, off the top money for CAL FIRE. And then under that, there was a bucket of about $1 billion for the legislature to program annually. Some people think it's a slush fund. Some people think it's a flexible source of funds. And then after that comes some other programs. The legislature wasn't terribly excited about what CARB did. And so there have been at least one hearing on the Senate side between Senate leadership and CARB and other folks trying to figure out how they pivot away from this. They really not wanted CARB to change the underlying program. CARB did vote 10-3 because of these pressures from the federal government, the need to extend the program to stabilize it, to adopt this. There was a lot of conversation at that marathon board meeting, which I think over both days went almost 24 hours of total hearing time. There was a slight concession that they wouldn't approve any of the MDI program applications until they had more information. And again, that's the manufacturer decarbonization incentive, looking at these deeply carbon intensive industries to see if there are ways that they can decarbonize. Some of the hardest to decarbonize sectors have been part of the scoping plan for a long time, but they need a path to get there. So this MDI program came under a tremendous amount of pressure by advocates, transit advocates, EJ advocates, and others, because they didn't want to have cap and invest seem to give more flexibility to those polluters. Here, there's also, though, a flip side of that particular coin, which is that some of California's most interesting, innovative climate companies are looking at this. And is there an opportunity here to grow green jobs in California, to grow decarbonization as an economic sector through MDI? And, as we kind of conclude in this quick review, and then we can answer some questions, because we're in the middle of the California budget process, GGRF and what happens in GGRF, those expectations that were set in SB 840, those are most likely going to be reset through the budget process. The governor's office was very supportive of what CARB did, immediately put out a press release praising CARB for passing the new rules. A lot of other people are trying to figure out, how do we close the gap for programs that are depending on revenues for grant allocations that have already been made on a multi-year commitment. So there's very real world implications here. And what's likely to happen is the legislature is going to have to find a way to back out parts of SB 840. Maybe it's the CAL FIRE piece that goes back to general fund. Maybe there's other ways they're going to backfill. But that's really the biggest challenge right now, is how do we get some stability in GGRF while the rest of these questions are being figured out. So that's just the quick overview. I'm sure I could talk about it more, but we only had 5 to 7 minutes. I'd be happy to answer any questions folks have.
Thank you, Steve. I don't see questions in the chat, but I know that a lot of folks are thinking about this. Oh, I see one. So I'm going to say more like Steve's doing a great job of being very measured about this. I want to say plainly, this is pretty bad news for folks like us who are looking at this from a perspective of the only recurring revenue source that is available on a regular basis for emission reduction grants like the ones we talk about here at LERN. This would, what folks are saying is that this is a potential $2 billion hit, essentially eliminates most of those kinds of grants. Is that an overstatement, Steve, or is that about right that unless the legislature, the Senate, who's working pretty hard here, addresses this, that's the trajectory that we are on, that we will essentially see most of these grant programs and even potentially some agencies be eliminated?
I think that that's a fair reaction, but I think from a solution standpoint, the decision by CARB has been made. I don't see them backtracking. So now the legislature has to figure out how to plug that hole. We have had much higher revenues than expected. We are not in the huge deficit that some had anticipated. So how does the legislature respond is, I think, the smarter question, and what can they preserve? I think the legislature has the ability to revisit this, in those tier 3 spending programs in GGRF, which are the ones that are largely going to be cut short. Do they take out their $1 billion that were in tier 2 and say, we're going to let that flow to tier 3? Do they move CAL FIRE out, like I said? And I think there's still going to be a lot of questions about how we get there. So it's all fair.
So let's take a question from Sandra. We're going to have to end this segment around 11:26 in order to stay on time. So go ahead, Sandra.
Thank you. So I'll try to be quick about this. You kind of mentioned some of the opposition or the effects on sort of the housing and transit sectors, but my question, and I feel like there needed to be maybe a more holistic look at what the implications are for the community choice aggregators. And linking this to the voluntary renewable energy program and the availability of free allowances. So this same decision removed those free allowances, which in essence will drive up the cost of CCAs providing renewable energy to ratepayers. And so I feel like that wasn't really well thought through in terms of because the electricity sector is one of the most unaffordable in the state. And, I do think the Center for Resource Solutions, did some level of advocacy, and some of the CCAs did some level of advocacy. But I really do feel like, that this decision was very short-sighted. And I'm curious to hear if there has been any thoughts. You said that there might be sort of a legislative process that might ameliorate some of these impacts. But I'm really curious to hear you know, what you think, how any kind of, remedial actions that for the renewable energy markets, and specifically if there will be any VREP, free allocate allowances in the future.
It's a great question. I hate to say it, but I think the CCAs, with all the noise around this decision, haven't been as clearly at the table. And maybe that's something that has to be really better elevated. The decision by CARB created a lot more opportunity for climate credit for the IOUs and others to pass back to ratepayers. I think it was probably, to your point, a short-term way to give the public something tangible. But I have a feeling that this conversation about CCAs is just starting, and I haven't heard anyone talking about it. So I would love to learn more about how that's going to work, but it hasn't really risen to the top of what the legislature is considering at this point.
Thanks, Steve. One more question from Christine. We got about 1 minute left.
Okay. Hi, Angie. So I also attended the hearing, Angie. I did see you speak, and I actually participated the following day too, just listening in. My main concern is this. Grants manager for the city of Auburn, we rely on LC top money. We are planning an expansion transit plan based on TIRCIP funding, and We were also recently awarded an ASIC grant, which we don't have a contract for. So obviously this could impact our city substantially. And what is really unclear, which I would look for an answer for, is how much is going to be taken away and when, because we have all these pending projects that we're in limbo right now. And with Arvin having the worst air pollution, one of the worst in the state of California, obviously we're very concerned about the effects of this. Is there going to be any money left over in these other funding categories? Obviously it'll be more competitive, but we really would like some answers here. And I don't know that you can answer them today, but it's of serious concern to us. Thank you.
Yeah, and part of the reason they passed 1207 last year's revenues had begun to decline because there was uncertainty in the market. And I think the real push here to extend cap and invest was around legal and other uncertainties causing a decline in confidence in the market. I think the good thing is, again, if you're not communicating to your legislators directly through your mayor and council, or if you have contract lobbyists, you need to be communicating these impacts. The municipal clients that we work with have been communicating to their delegations, to the legislature about their concerns. The advocacy groups I work with on transit and housing have been communicating. But I think each of these legislators that are whether it's Arvin or anyone else, they need to hear specifically what the consequences are for you, because they hear a lot of very general consequences, but those specific things they need to hear.
Okay, I need to move us forward. I'm so sorry. So we have so many other speakers to get through. I want to encourage folks to hang around in the chat and ask more questions. Steve has a little bit of time. He may be able to answer more questions. I think there's going to be more for us to talk about on this one as things move forward. And I'm tracking the engagement from CARB that's supposed to come out of this as well. More engagement. I'd like to see what happens with the Senate. And I'm also really interested in a lot of, at least, I don't know, lip service around, hey, we're really moved by all these comments from the thousand comments that we received, and how do we all create a more stable funding source for local climate action? So that's, I think, a conversation we should all lean into. Okay, I'm so sorry to the California Energy Commission, whose slide was up this whole time. That had nothing to do with the poor geothermal program, but I did want to let you know there's a geothermal grant and loan program that has a solicitation that's coming in June or July on a federal cost share, where local jurisdictions are eligible applicants, and there'll be up to $3 million in cost share funding from CEC. And so it's to match statutory requirements at the federal level, and it's specifically around geothermal. There is a workshop if you'd like to attend on June 16th at 10 a.m. And so we'll drop that link as well. Let's go to the next spotlight before we get into our featured conversation. This one is, I mentioned SGC, LCI, and Department of Conservation have a lot of grants out right now, including the Transformative Climate Communities, Community Resilience Centers Program, and Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Program. TCC is out now. You have to do a pre-application by June 30th. Community Resilience Center has its guidelines out right now, and it actually formally opens on July 2nd, so coming right off the bat. And Extreme Heat we're expecting in the summer to be released, but there's so many, and there's a few other opportunities that the SGC and LCI are soliciting, putting on the streets soon too. There are office hours available right now for the Transformative Climate Communities program I wanted you to be aware of, as well as this workshop that they're going to be doing. So June 24th, there's a general session workshop to hear all about these programs and how you can take advantage of them. And they even have this handy fact sheet, which is just a screenshot on the right for a few of the programs, just like a side-by-side, because a lot of these can be confusing about what you can do with each one of them. And so it's really great to be able to see them side-by-side, how they're funded, what they're intended to do, and their timelines. So thanks to SGC for putting these resources together. And it's just so great that there's still funds flowing for now on these kinds of things. All right, so let's go to our featured conversation. And thanks again to Steve. He's, I think, continuing to look at the chat, and for all of you engaging in that conversation on GGRF. Like I said, more to come. Okay, so let's go to our first featured speaker. So we are joined by Fritz Foo. He is a supervisor on Outreach and Engagement Unit with the California Energy Commission, and we've been chatting a little bit about the EPIC program and the latest investment plan. And very excited to share with you where they're at on that and how eventually, how you can help shape grant programs that may flow from it. All right, Fritz, we'll hand it to you. Thanks for being here.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go and start sharing my screen. All right, let's get started. I think my timer's on. Yeah, very excited today to present on where the California Energy Commission is at with its electric program investment charge. To give a little bit of context, we are beginning to build out our draft initiatives and research topics for the next 5 years of funding. EPIC 5 spans from 2026 to 2030. So this is an opportunity to share some of that information today, and I'll preview a little bit of sort of the main takeaways that we also have a public workshop this upcoming Thursday morning to solicit more ideas more formally. That'll be, like a multi-hour workshop to really dive into these topics. But otherwise, we'll take the time here today to really share how you can get involved or get engaged at this step where we are, again, developing kind of the boundaries for the funding opportunities. And one other thing I'll just quickly mention, in sort of the prep leading up to this presentation, Angie mentioned that it is really a focus on also alignment with ongoing pipelines of projects. And so wanted to emphasize that there are definitely opportunities, even though these are upcoming and new solicitations likely in the next 18 months or 12 to year or 18 months or so for the first solicitations to come out. That is something that we are keeping in mind is, how to sort of get unstuck these ideas that you all may be having at the local government level with that alignment with our research topics. So just to provide a very high-level overview of the EPIC program, our annual budget is about $148 million. That may go up a little bit with this upcoming investment cycle with a potential inflation adjustment. But the EPIC program has been around now since 2011, so just about 15 years of program implementation. And it is funded by a ratepayer surcharge from the three largest electric investor-owned utilities. That would be PG&E, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric. And EPIC used to be funded on a 3-year cycle, is now on a 5-year cycle. But it really does support the development of clean energy innovations and technologies at all stages. Everything from sort of earlier pilot lab or pilot scale demonstrations to more community deployment, actual installation, steel on the ground. And it really is towards this goal of scaling and commercialization. So the benefits that are accrued to ratepayers and the electric grid in general really are to promote safe, equitable, affordable, reliable, and environmentally sustainable clean energy. Let me go to the next slide. One of the things I will mention is that because the program is funded from the ratepayer surcharge from the electric investor-owned utilities, that means projects have to also be sited in electric IOU territory. One of those three. Just to highlight some of the high-level benefits to Californians and, certainly in this case, local governments, it's important to note that there is a diverse research portfolio, which means that the range of benefits also are diverse. And that could be everything from lowering the cost of manufacturing and deployment, for example, to creating applications that can streamline permitting for electric appliances. We also, some projects also try to generate customer savings through energy efficiency and load flexibility. Some of y'all may be familiar, for example, with the advanced energy communities that have been funded over the last several years and concluded this year, working on, for example, virtual power plants. There's also a sense of optimizing electrical grid infrastructure and investment and use. That's particularly helpful with, for example, modeling that can inform load supply, load demand, potential forecasting, and then generally lowering the cost of decarbonization for buildings, industry, and transportation. And again, that can be in the form of potentially helping pilot a industrial electrification project or supporting more vehicle to grid, bidirectional charging, a variety of different tools and technologies there. So now for the sort of meat of where you all can get involved in this development process. So really since 2023, the California Public Utilities Commission, which is the overseer of the program as a whole, they've been developing strategic goals, which then feed into developing strategic objectives that then lead into where we are at now with the administrator initiatives. So a little bit confusing potentially, but essentially there are 5 large strategic goals focused on things like buildings, on transportation. And then from those goals, the CPUC developed 13 strategic objectives. And those don't necessarily map perfectly to the goals. It's really more sort of an all-encompassing, knowing that we're working towards buildings, towards transportation. What are some of the key objectives that maybe are cross-cutting across between those different goals? And so that's where we're at now, where the objectives were approved in February of this year. And now we, as the CEC, alongside the investor-owned utilities, are developing their initiatives that then essentially create the boundaries for the topic areas and the projects. We are here now in this sort of initiative and budget plan development. So we are planning to submit our investment plan to the Public Utilities Commission in August of this year, at which point they'll take a few months to review and approve that, hopefully by early 2027. And at that point, that will really kick off more of the formal solicitation scoping. So at this point, we are engaging with all different types of groups, from tribes to environmental justice groups, certainly local governments, both at the city and county level, where there's previously been a lot of strong participation and partnership on project teams. And again, to emphasize, part of this is asking feedback for our initiatives, which I'm about to share on the next screen, aligned with current needs, opportunities out there. But again, also how could these technologies, if there are already ongoing projects, how could they be complementary to those in terms of getting them unstuck if there is, again, some idea in mind locally? So sharing these here, and I did not include the strategic objectives because, again, it kind of maps a little bit complex to take a look at it through that way. But really want to emphasize here on the right, these 9 CEC draft initiatives. And I'll quickly run through them over the next couple slides. But again, I would emphasize if there's interest in learning more, on Thursday, we have a public workshop. So onwards to the draft initiatives. I'll share this photo very quickly from one of our advanced energy communities in Los Angeles at Bassett Avocado Heights, where they deployed retrofits in low-income housing. And that was a project that went on to demonstrate virtual power plant potentials, but also how do we create interesting financial and technology strategies for these types of communities. So the first one to note is harnessing the value of transportation electrification for ratepayers. This involves grid charging, bidirectional charging, as well as ways to better develop and orchestrate the charging. So, for example, are there opportunities for dense urban areas or very, very rural areas to promote a better electric vehicle charging infrastructure development? The next one is on distributed energy resource support and really just helping them make those more accessible, affordable, and providing more grid reliability. So some of the potential opportunities there are, again, virtual power plants, demand flexibility, potential energy storage systems, including things like microgrids that might be of interest depending on your sort of proximity to the larger electric grid. The next one is focused more on technical advisory or technical assistance, I should say. And so, actually, sorry, wrong one. This one's on grid connection. So there are some opportunities for infrastructure improvement and optimization That includes planning tools as well as actual technological solutions. For example, things that optimize the transformers on the grid level. So some potential opportunities there that we're considering. The next one, this is the one I was previously thinking about. This is we're trying to also fund more energy capacity building. That's really been a chronic source of input that there's been a need to support more local government or just public participation. So considering opportunities there. Approaches to building decarbonization through some of the technologies I've mentioned, including retrofits, neighborhood level decarbonization, commercial buildings, yeah, electrification retrofits. This one here is aligned more on protecting communities' environmental health through this energy transition. Some of that is focused on air quality research in buildings, but there's also an element of using our modeling, our analytical tools to inform planning at a policy and implementation level. And this year, the second last one is focused on next generation energy storage solutions, thinking about the circular battery economy, opportunities there again for local systems to provide backup power, for example, including at like hospitals, at climate resilience centers. And I think the last one here is focused on industrial decarbonization, with again, focus on reducing emissions, electrification, and first of kind deployments. Oh, and one more, resilience and adaptation. Yeah, again, using some climate modeling tools, wildfire risk mitigation, and planning activities to help support that. I know that was a lot to digest. Ways to stay connected, highly recommend that you all sign up for our listservs. If you head to this website here, you'll scroll down to R&D and you'll be able to pick EPIC from amongst the list. We also have, like I said, an EPIC 5 investment workshop this Thursday. And finally, later on this year at the EPIC Symposium, we will have a large gathering where we present and debut some of our projects and the findings there. So happy to take any quick Q&A. I think I'm a little over on time, but also will be sticking around afternoon to answer any questions or solicit any input.
Thank you, Fritz. Just really glad we were able to share this with all of you as the funding landscape tumbles and turns in all sorts of interesting ways. We, at least for now, we've kept the public purpose charge that I think has continues to fund the EPIC program around a lot of other really important efficiency related efforts. So this is one to be hopeful about and look forward to. And I really want to say thanks to California Energy Commission for thinking of us as a way to hear from you about how to shape this program in a way that really meets some of your needs. I'm not seeing questions in the chat, but here's what I want to do. In our bonus breakout, we want to dedicate that to more conversation on this particular program. So if you can hang around afternoon, this is an opportunity to share some direct feedback or input on some of these opportunities that are going to come out through EPIC maybe give a little more granular feedback on the kinds of projects that you have stuck right now that you would like to see become eligible activities under grants like these. Right, Fritz?
Yeah, no, I think that is spot on. And, I think I see one question in the chat about accessing, whether POUs are able to access some of the funds. Unfortunately, right now with the real attention on ratepayer benefits and affordability, the projects do have to be cited in investor-owned utilities or investor-owned utility territory, but there are opportunities, for example, in partnership where there might be, the site, the company itself is developing it's in an investor-owned utility, but there are related projects or efforts from that company working with POUs as well. So that's one way where there can be a little bit of a connection. It is about at that point finding the right partners.
Thank you so much, Fritz. So back to you when we get to our bonus breakout. And for folks that are coming to our SLECC meeting on June 23rd, I actually think we're going to talk about your stuck projects, and we're going to talk about the opportunity to maybe test a project inventory to really help share with agencies like CEC the kinds of needs that you have on the ground. So we're hoping a lot of you join us for that. Thanks, Fritz. Let's go to our last speaker of the day. So Victoria Morin, this is kind of a unique thing. We don't always do this at LERN, but I'm excited to do it to kind of showcase a good case study where there's been some successes happening in the city of Cupertino related to their data and analytics. It's really been helpful for them, and to share it with you because it might be something that you can consider in your neck of the woods. So Victoria, happy to have you here. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Yeah, definitely pivoting topics a little bit about municipal plus utility management. I'll get into the plus in just a minute. But it's definitely more about what the cities are doing on the grounds and like boots on the ground work, and how me as a sustainability specialist is really diving into our municipal utility data. My role is to implement our climate action plan. So focusing on everything from energy to transportation, waste, kind of have a lot of different hats. And really this pulls together a lot of different people in our organization and really being able to harness the different pieces of it. So go ahead, next slide. I'll try to breeze through these really quickly. So we have 19 buildings that I manage, green spaces, which includes everything from our golf course to our parks. We also, part of the plus is manage our elementary school landscapes and our libraries under contract. So not only do I have to manage the actual usage and cost of it, but we're under partnership and billing to all of these other jurisdictions and organizations. And then also monitoring like our streetlight upgrade project and working with PG&E on some of our solar panels. And then integrating EV chargers is something that is pretty new into this utility management space, but everything's so combined into one that it just makes sense to have everything in that one spot. Go ahead, next slide. So within what I manage and this utility software, trying to convey these 450 different utility accounts from, what is our CCA and having multiple CCAs and multiple water providers and true ups with ABAG power, gas procurement, and really trying to educate people on how many of our resources are going into buildings versus parks and looking at all of the different pieces. This image isn't exactly right, but it's close enough to explain that it's really complex. Go ahead, next slide. So I think everyone really feels this struggle of spreadsheets. And in 2012, we started tracking our utility data in a spreadsheet. And having that headache that we all go through. And it really came to light in 2015. We started with our first utility software management when the drought hit. And so educating about our water consumption was an essential piece at that time, but it really has expanded and grown from that. I know several different softwares are able to process all of this data. But the one that we went into really helped with that transparency piece and streamlining our internal processes. So go ahead, next slide. So the usage verification, this was one of my main focus areas. So we didn't have any sort of audit team, right? Up until I took over this program, our finance team was taking the paper bills, putting it in a spreadsheet, uploading it with their own assigned GL code, and just pressing pay. There was no communication between our facilities, boots on the ground, and finance. Not even to mention that finance or no one was tracking the consumption of it really at all and making sure, hey, there's a leak and that is going to mess up our budget for next year. So having this one software integrated, it now sends alerts and usage detection for our facilities team, and the correct person, if they're in parks and managing water, they get that alert versus high gas consumption, right? So there's all of these different pieces, and then the software actually generates a monthly billing invoice to our finance department, and we've integrated all of those billing codes within the software. One of the questions I get a lot is how does this software actually streamline it? So it's new technology. This one's pretty like like using AI to pull in. They have access to all of our PG&E and water utility software accounts as well as ChargePoint. And so they actually go into the system for us and pull out those monthly bills and then use AI to do screen reading. And so they're able to get the nuance of all of the bill line items for me. Go ahead, next slide. So these are some of the questions that I really get and struggle with on the day-to-day that like we have things that have come up, like our PG&E was billed to a random residential address. And we're like, why are we paying for this residential gas usage? And it turns out the meter was just located on a residential property down the street. And just looking at sort of billing codes and how an electric meter is being billed to stormwater. And so those types of issues really do arise. And so having all of this information in one place and having the right people in the conversation has helped a lot. Go ahead, next slide. So this is the software that I'm referring to. We have used several other softwares in the past and have found that this new technology has really helped us to make all of those changes. So like I mentioned, the EV charger integration is part of it. Energy Star reporting, it has streamlined and I can connect directly to Energy Star. Budgeting projections, so it actually uses smart technology to integrate all of the weather variations and the potential high and low for rate increases. And so it can come up with those projections based off of our accounts that we've had into it. We were able to put in all of our historic data back to 2012. And we have actually found it from this integration that there was some of our errors in our past, like one bill for water was reported as like 1,000 CCFs when it actually was supposed to be 1,000 gallons. So that's a big mistake in our reporting and transparency. And so being able to catch those inconsistencies was a big one. One of the main questions I get asked is about staff time and cost. So it took about 4 months for us to translate all of our historic data into this software and make sure that we caught some of these big data bugs and made it into what we were looking for and how it best suited our needs for reports. It was probably another 2 months to build out the public dashboard, which I'll get into in a second. We did have the customer service to do all of this historic integration for us. So I didn't have to touch any of our old bills or existing bills. So it was a one-time startup fee and then it's of $10,000 and then it's about $33,000 annually, but that's teased out into different pieces of like EV chargers is one cost and the dashboard is an additional. So thinking about different pieces of it. Go ahead, next slide. So I just have a few case studies that I'll run through. So this is moving on to our public dashboard. So this is something I've built out to help educate the public on like what is actually costing the city, what is our major building consumption. And so one of the questions we just got from a council member was, why has Public Works budget increased $10 million over the last year? And I was able to say, well, hey, look at our homepage of our dashboard and you'll see that our costs actually increased about $1 million over 10 years. So just being able to show them our library is the most expensive and using the most energy, but our library actually pays us back. So it's not as much, but then there's nuances of subtracting the EV chargers from that cost. So the library doesn't pay for the EV consumption. But that's a whole nother 10-minute lecture. Go ahead, next slide. Again, just another story point of showing how our utilities are consuming gas and electric. There is a page on this website about emissions factors and converting all of our different emissions factors from our CCAs and having clean energy and showcasing how we can make those biggest changes. And then this is a good example of that anomaly detection that our facilities never told us their HVAC system broke, but you're able to see that in the numbers. of like, oh, we actually had to switch to portable heaters because we weren't using our gas heaters. So that spiked up electricity, but the gas fluctuated. So those types of stories are really important to share. And then you can see the difference of the not only the emissions, but the actual consumption and cost. Go ahead, next slide. I think I have just two more. This was an interesting showcase project about our water savings. So we did a landscape conversion over time. Go ahead, next slide. Solar panels. So this was another reporting case study where we had one facility that actually has solar already. And then I was able to do cost projections for 3 more city facilities that we are getting on the NEM2 rate. And so being able to say, hey, this is how much I think we're going to be able to save after the installation of those PV projects. Go ahead, next slide. Oh, okay, that's it. So there's the website. I can also throw it in the chat. I see a lot of questions coming in, so I think I'm about at time, but you can tell me if I have a few minutes.
Let's just take a couple of questions here. Thank you so much, Victoria. Give some emojis of some kind if you like hearing about a local success like this at LERN. Right, I know. I feel like, well, we have a lot of funding agencies here usually, but let's also take advantage of what each other has to offer. So Victoria, first question I see here in the chat, do you have any privacy issues using AI to read bills?
No, this question has come up a lot. It is a SaaS contract, and we have a giant liability section for this company that if there's any data leaks from their software, that they are responsible for a lot of money. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's definitely baked into our contract.
Perfect. Let's see. Felicia is asking, great presentation. Does this analysis include weather normalization when comparing to previous years?
Yes. So that's part of our budgeting projections that you can build out forecasts with it. And then there will be explanations on high-low weather normalization.
Okay. And Natalie is asking, can you share how much the additional to add the additional to add the dashboard? This is super helpful.
Yes, I can look up that number. Because we were the very first jurisdiction to build out this dashboard, I think it was a little bit more expensive for us in all of their customer service time. But I have shared our RFP and all of our bids and costs with other jurisdictions if they want to see all of the nuances of the software functionality that we required and the cost breakdown from that. So feel free to shoot me an email. I'll put it in the chat.
All right. Those are the questions I see. Thank you so much for sharing that, Victoria. Thanks to the City of Cupertino, and good job. That sounded like a very successful endeavor. So we're going to wrap up this portion of the call with just a quick announcement. For SLECC, you guys are going to get a lot of hugs this year. So 17th Annual SLECC Forum, June 24th, 25th. If you haven't already registered, you still can. As always, it's free to local governments, so we encourage you to register. There is late registration still available for others of you that still would like to come. And so you're encouraged to add the June 23rd SLECC meeting when you register. So that's going to be a conversation between state agency representatives and local government representatives. And this is a really snapshot of a draft agenda that we're feeling very excited about. This is a new approach. So it's going to be a 3-hour meeting the day before SLECC this year to have a really robust conversation around a lot of the priorities that we've raised as SLECC over the years. So we're going to have a conversation with some academics who are telling us how they're working with agencies to help deploy solutions to some of the barriers that we have raised. So we're excited to hear from Chris Jones, Eric Fournier, Benjamin Finkler from different universities. We're also going to have a conversation with Carrie Fleischer from the PUC. She is the rates and DER person, and we're going to talk about the intersection between energy affordability and distributed energy resources. We have our local leads helping with this conversation and the next conversation around streamlined funding and implementation, where we are going to have a deeper conversation around how we compile and inventory existing projects that are stuck. That leads us to a regional breakout where we're going to workshop some of these those stuck projects within our regions and help each other out, sort of crowdsource some assistance opportunities. And then we end with a reception. So we hope you'll join us for that with some light appetizers and optional drinks and conversations, like in small groups at roundtables with state folks on input opportunities and also some of our academic folks. So very active conversation. Please do join us for that. And we'll see you soon. We're really excited. Let's go to our last slide, which is where we can say thanks again to all of our speakers who showed up today. That was a wild adventure, a roller coaster of emotions. Not all is lost, my friends. When we stick together, we can make things happen. I have lots of hopes and I have ideas. So let's keep it going. And next up, we're going to go to our bonus breakout. Where folks are encouraged to stick around for a little bit more of an informal conversation where we have, you can give an announcement, success story or opportunity, or share a need for information, raise a topic that you want to hear to learn. I think in general, this time, we're going to probably stick on the EPIC topic for a little bit longer and see if we can provide some live feedback for Fritz, since we've got your attention here. Let me take just a second here just to see if other topics raise up. You can go ahead and drop them in the chat if there's anything else you need to raise at our bonus breakout. And if it's the top of the hour and you have to go, thank you so much for being here and we'll see you soon. So let's see, just a couple of